Hey there, you're watching Bare Knuckle Binder. Welcome to the channel. It's been a minute since I've made a video. Actually, it's been over 2 months. And a lot's happened. Not too much has happened on the truck, actually. Well, a little bit behind the scenes, but honestly, the last 2 months of my life have been really difficult. As many of you know, I've been in Wisconsin since late October and taking care of my dad and my family, helping out wherever I could. My dad has been fighting a battle with cancer. My dad passed away on January 16th, and it's just been really tough for me to get back out here and find the gumption to work on this truck since then. My dad was one of my best friends, and he taught me so much about working on old stuff, motors in general. And actually, if you drive a Harley Davidson, you've probably seen my dad's technical videos that he made for years when he worked for S&S Cycle out of Iola, Wisconsin. He was there for many, many years. So anyway, that's what's been holding me up, and I finally have gotten back into working on this thing, and I'm making a lot of progress right now. We're close enough to get this thing running soon under its own power with brakes, somewhat wired, before I have to go back to Texas and resume my real life. So this is looking a lot different since the last video. This here is the Coleman axle stub. I have put a new seal in there. That seal, if you remember the last video, this was a disgusting mess. The passenger side was somehow even worse. It dumped out about a half gallon of water when I pulled off the hub cover. So I have meticulously gone through and cleaned everything. There was broken parts in the driver's side. I had to get my buddy Greg over here to TIG weld some aluminum for me, some cast aluminum. And then Greg came back and he and I actually relined the brake shoes on this because one of the brake shoes on this side was worn all the way down to the steel. But besides being worn out, the shoes were just soaked in grease and oil to the point that they were unsavable. So just went through, drilled out all the rivets, relined them ourselves because I don't know anybody around here that relines brake shoes. In Texas, I've got a place, but not here. So we just had to do it ourselves. That was a way too involved experience for me to film the whole thing, but maybe in the future we'll do that because we actually got some pretty good results. Anyway, I actually started out filming a video about cleaning all the parts in December before everything got crazy. And so I'll run that footage right now. And then when we come back, I will be putting this Coleman axle together. Just like when I took it apart, I'm gonna show this side. I'm gonna get the other side off camera just so I can get it done quicker. Enjoy this footage of me cleaning parts, and I will see you in a minute. Hey there, you watch Bare Knuckle Binder. Welcome to the channel. I'm not normally this perky in the morning. Actually, I'm not. I'm just faking it. So I am continuing work on the 1954 International R170 with a Coleman 4x4 conversion. In the last video, I took apart the driver's side of the Coleman axle, and now I have all the pieces. They are gnarly dirty, and so now I had to clean them. So right now I'm in Wisconsin. I grew up here. I live in Texas, but for family reasons right now I'm in Wisconsin for the foreseeable future, and I am working out of my dad's shop. And there's a lot of advantages to working in my dad's shop. Like, this truck fits. Like, I have a 2-car garage and it's like 20 pounds of sugar on a 5-pound sack. But one holdup is my dad and I have different tools. Sometimes I don't know where some of his tools are. I brought a lot of my tools, like the welder and my torch and stuff, just because sometimes I prefer my own stuff. But I can't bring my parts washer. You know, that's just too much of a hassle. And my dad doesn't have a parts washer. That doesn't mean we can't get this done. Oh, that looks like somebody put a Zerk on the brake drum. Oh, that's awful. Anyway, back to my point was, I've got a tub, I got a bunch of rags, you know, hardware here. I'm using mineral spirits. This is one of my favorite things to clean parts with. A little more detail in the hub there. And I've got random containers. Little old cans. Stuff to help separate and organize parts. I don't know if that styrofoam's gonna hold up to any parts cleaner, but. So this tub, these rags, that's kind of the star of the show. I can fill these with bolts and get them to soak. Power ring. Yeah, just a makeshift table out of sawhorses and an old door. But we'll get it done. I know it's pretty satisfying to watch cleaning videos. But like I said when I was working on the radiator, I don't know how many videos back, straighten out fins, it's like, it's really so fun to watch this stuff on a time lapse, but it's excruciating to watch it in real time. So I'm just gonna time lapse most of this cleaning video. If I gotta talk about something, I will, but I don't know, I'll try to find some music to put over the video that's not too annoying. I guess we'll find out our differences in opinions when it airs. And yeah, I gotta get to work. See you in a bit. Oh, so I've been cleaning this up, and the guy I bought this from, Dave, he told me at one point he had the truck buried, the front axle and the front drive shaft broke, and he had to dig a tunnel underneath the truck and pull the drive shaft pieces out, take it in, get a new drive shaft made, go back the next day or a day or so later and replace the drive shaft in the little tunnel while the truck was buried in mud. And apparently he never cleaned out the front axle, so I've been digging out just so much dirt and junk. It's crazy. I've got one of the brake shoes off. I have to get the other one off. These anchor bolts definitely appear to be rusted solid, so that's gonna take some finagling. And that one bolt is stuck, so I'm still working on it. Just a little, I still gotta clean that up too, but anyway, back to time lapse. So here's a passenger side. I really kind of breezed over this because I just have to get it done. I'm getting the brake shoes out of this one. Obviously everything has to come off, but I'm getting the brake shoes off of this one so that I can realign it with my buddy Greg this afternoon. The entire reason I pulled up this video just to show you this, but right here, this is where the brake shoe hold down hardware mounts, and it's a slotted washer or a tiny horseshoe clip on these. And those can be tough to find, especially if you're in the moment and you don't have time to make one or track one down. So this guy, last person who's in here, welded a washer on there. Obviously that's not impossible to get off, but I'm sure this little guy is ruined on there, so I might have to weld another washer on there when I put it back together. I mean, this really just goes to show you that even if you can't do it right or you don't know what you're doing, you can still keep the next guy busy. All right, so I made sure that you can see this. So, well illuminated. So the first thing that's got to go on here now that the seal is in here is the axle extension. Now I went through every part of the wheel end of this axle on both sides, and I cleaned everything down to bare metal, and what I needed to, I painted. I went into this thinking for some reason that I would be able to open up this Coleman axle and replace just the wheel cylinder and have brakes. And I don't know, I've been working on old trucks my entire life, and I don't know what gave me such a delusional idea, but that of course was not the case, and I've had to completely rebuild everything. I've had to rebush all the Coleman mechanism, like the ring and yoke, and I didn't rebush the brake shoes. They're good enough. I went through and I painted stuff with KBS chassis paint where I could, stuff that had like a tighter tolerance. I used black implement paint, and on the drums I used high heat paint. Anyway, that said, here's the axle extension. This guy goes in here. And in fact, the little lip that's on it will hold it in place if you can get her pushed in there. Well, we're done. No, okay, just to start it. So before we start building onto this thing, I have to install this thing, which is, this is one piece. The steering arm there, you can see, is sandwiched in the middle, and then that's the guy for the drag length. That connects to the tie rod. Now, as you may, a little bit of residual. This is all cleaned out. This is where this here sandwich is on, right in here. This is where the guy with the wedge goes. Now, before we get into the wedge and all the bearings and stuff, there's a trick to putting this together. And the trick is to put on the backing plate first, and then there is this oil shield that goes on. That's the cast aluminum piece. It's a tricky little thing to take apart. It's a tricky little thing to put on, but it's really easy. So I'm going to show you how to do it. But first, I'm going to put the brake line onto the wheel cylinder and tap the copper crush washers. So I'm going to do that real quick, and I'll be right back. I have my wheel cylinder on there. I have the copper crush washers crushed down on it, tightened up. This thing, you have to lead with this side. Now, it only goes on one way, so I like to dip it down like so, and then you can just kind of finagle her around like so. And now she's in position. Now it's got the bolts all around there that I got to put in, but I'll get those in and we'll start putting her on. So now that I have the cast aluminum grease shield on there that protects the brake shoes, it's supposed to protect the brake shoes from grease and oil. Doesn't always work apparently, as we well know. But anyway, these things are wipers and they go inside here. And let's see, they wipe like this when the thing is turning. So this is just felt. It's the same felt that goes around this thing here. I haven't installed that yet. I need to oil this felt before installing it so that it slides on the surface instead of catching. But on these wipers, instead of like on these grooves here, like this one, and then on the bearing retainer, I'll show you, those ones grab it nice and tight and they hold the felt. Whereas these ones, the felt is always a little bit looser. It will compress in there once it's installed. But what I like to do is I put like a little bit of silicone on the back, like 3 dots, and it just kind of holds that felt in place until it's oiled down and compressed when installed. So anyway, it's just, it goes in the sides here. Like so, let me zoom in for you. The felt is installed on the sides here, and it's just held in by 2 flathead screws on the side. All right, now I have to get this assembly, this guy, onto here. And to do that, you have to pack them. All right, sorry, that air compressor kicks on all the time whenever I'm trying to do anything. So my point was, to put this thing on, I have to pack the bearing, drive it into position on the bottom, and put the race on it. You can't seat the race and have the bearing on there and fit it all in. It just will not clearance. So you have to do that and come up from the bottom and then basically press this thing onto the bottom to seat the bearing race. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, so I'm gonna use some blocks of wood and a jack. Use the weight of the truck to my advantage. This is too jankety, or maybe we can make her work. There, it looks like it's kind of lined up there. Okay, so now I gotta put the top bearing race in. Now that I have the lower bearing in, race set on the top, now it's time for the top bearing. And the top bearing rides inside here, which is the housing for the wedge. Now the wedge, to me, this is kind of the central secret working of the Coleman axle. This is why it's so hard to get one of these apart if you don't understand how it works. So let's see how it works. So you have this, which is machined to the exact diameter of that, and this sits in there straight, and this is the wedge. Now the wedge, of course, has a bearing underneath it, and there's a bearing directly below that, so that makes an axis for the steering. Now, to tighten the steering, the wedge, this is the wedge. It's an actual wedge, and it rides in this channel. This has a big chunky bearing spacer that rides in between the bearings and directly over the pivot bearings. So it spaces the large wheel bearings and rides right on top of the pivot bearings. This thing, as you drive the wedge forward, it pushes down. Here, let me show you how. So as you push forward on the wedge, it raises up out of that channel, which pushes up on this and forces down on these bearings, tightening the steering and getting all the slop out of it. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty ingenious. So anyway, now it's time to put the wedge housing in, so which means I have to pack this bearing and set it on there. And then we can put this in and move on from there. So now that this thing will flush up, I can drive the wheel bearings over it in the bearing spacer and set the preload. But that setting the preload actually comes last. I just need to get the bearing, the first bearing on there and the bearing spacer to hold this, and then I'm going to build the brakes. That sure went on a lot easier than I bet everyone thought it would. I spent a lot of time with this thing, cleaning the inside of it, trying to find the high spots, and it looks like I'm just going to have to kind of tap it on there, which is fine. It's got to be tight, but it doesn't have to be a problem. There it is. I had to get a thin board underneath here on the jack and press up against it to take all the pressure off with the wedge housing. Take that off. It's going to tighten up a bit, but went on a whole lot easier than it came off. The next things that I have to do, I have to build the brakes. That's the first thing I have to do. I want to get that done. And then I will put an oil seal made out of felt around this channel here. And once that's done and the brakes are on, then I oil the felt. I put some grease over the top of that one last time, and then I put the hub back on it with the brake drum and everything. All right, building brakes. Here's some relined brake shoes. The anchor bolts that were stuck, these are them. Now, this side I had more problems than the other side because by the time I made it to the other side, I was anticipating it. And so with these ones, they ended up getting distorted really well on the ends, and I had to file them until I had some type of shape and could save the remaining threads. So that's what's going on with these. Yeah. Not stoked about it, but it's not a total loss. And of course, these anchors are unobtainium. You cannot find these. They don't exist for replacements. So we just got to do what we can with what we got. Shoes. Okay. This horseshoe clip on there, I gotta bend that. It might be easier if I face it towards the camera, huh? Gotta fold this horseshoe boy there. So that just holds the brake shoe down. We gotta get this spring on there. So let's there. So the spring, gotta get it to that hole. Right there. Now, this brake shoe, this one is in off the edge. I thought I had adjusted these in, so let me just see on that. I think it's like 11/16 or something. See that? I'm gonna adjust them in all the way. All right, it's good there on the top. On the bottom, we're sticking out a little bit. So we'll do something about that now. Okay. That's in all the way. That's in all the way. There it is. Brake set up on there. The shoes are in as far as they'll go, top and bottom. So now I gotta put this seal on here, the felt seal, oil it up, and then we can put the drum on it. So now the drum, when I say the drum, I mean the drum and the massive hub assembly and all that. So with the felt, I like to start at the top. It really doesn't matter, honestly. This felt will seal just the same. Really jam her down in there. And like the wipers, you have to oil this before you put it together. I don't want to oil it until after I have it in there because it's going to be miserable to work with. All right, that looks pretty good. That will all push down in there once the hub's on. The felt is oiled. Okay. Another bearing to pack. Man, we are really getting somewhere on this thing. So it's been a pretty straightforward assembly to this point, but now it's getting into some correction stuff. What I had to do with the ring and yoke here is I had to rebush it. You can see probably see the shiny bushing there, shiny bushing here. These two joints have bushings in them as well, and they're also shiny. Okay, so the thing about these bushings is that they're tight. And I'd rather them be really tight than really loose. I actually had to ream these out because when I put the bushings in, when I drove them in, they tightened up. When I took this apart in that video where it's showing the Coleman in action, turning and while spinning, you may have noticed if you looked really closely at the hub, the axle shaft, it would seem like it was moving. And it was, for two reasons. One, these bushings were wallered out. So I've done my best to address that. The other thing is that when a Coleman gets old and kind of wears out, it will wear on these edges inside the pins. And so this whole assembly it'll look like it's dropping because it's kind of basically just as it turns, gravity is just dropping it. So I decided I'd try to put some thrust washers right here and on the opposite side. However, I figured out that a better plan of action is to put a thin thrust washer here on the outside where it actually would be doing the falling, if that makes sense. So I've already test fitted this whole thing on here, but the thing is I have to put the ring and yoke in at this point because I had to put all the bearing stuff in. I can't do that around the yoke. Now I have to do it vertically instead of just laying down horizontally. So these are my pins, and these are the thrust washer spacers that I settled on to be the right size. So hopefully when I get these in with the new bushings, it'll be pretty centered and it'll stay centered and stay ride true. So here we go. Let's just try to get this son of a gun in here. All right, she's in place. Now the thing is I gotta put the pin in. All right. I think I got that one in. Just turn her around top. Let's see if I can get her sunk in all the way home. All right, keep her bolt in. Let's see if we can't get this guy in there. This is way easier. I can see it. How about you just line right up, buddy? Oh, okay. I get it. Hey, she's in. I don't think I could get spacers any thicker in there, so tiny amount of play, but without taking this to a machinist, this is as close as I can get. I've messed with this thing for months. She's home. Now there's a slot in the top of the pins. I don't know if I just mentioned it, but there's a slot in the top of the pins, and that is for aiming it towards the keeper bolt if you need to. But honestly, you can move the ring and yoke, and it'll move it a little bit. So that's what I'm just doing. All right. So that doesn't feel like it's strain. So now let's get this axle shaft in here. Get this done with. All right, now the axle shaft We got our seal collar here. I've gone over it a little bit with some fine sandpaper just to make sure there's no burrs on it. Now, to put this thing in there though, I'm gonna oil it up so that when it goes through that seal, it doesn't just tear it up right away, because what would be the point of doing all this, you know? Ah, man, let me bend these tabs real quick. I wasn't thinking. Dummy. Man, I can't believe the comments I would have got from folks online. Can you imagine? Comment section warriors would descend on me like locusts. Oh, God. Disaster avoided. Okay. Yeah, careful there, buddy. Yeah. Okay. Brings back memories. Okay, so all right. Let's stuff her in there. Oh, got my pipe plugs. Those are just a 3/8 square. Then there's these guys. All right. Yeah, that's not bad. That's nice and tight. Let's put the cover on that thing. I'm excited. Oh, this thing painted a while ago. It's covered in dust. All right, so it's got a locator, an alignment dowel hole, and there's the alignment dowel. Don't fall on me, baby. Get one of these started in here to hold it. Oh, that dust is embarrassing. But it looks so good with those grade 8s. Look at that. Ooh, yeah, baby. Another Coleman rebuilt. All right, so the last thing I gotta do, I gotta put a punch in there, I gotta drive it in, get that wedge tightened up, and then put the bolt into the keeper. Now here we are at the final step, setting up the Coleman. As you can see, this is the inside of, this is the back view inside the wheel. This here is the hole that I drive the punch through to set the preload tension on these bearings. This is a bearing, this is a bearing, grease fittings so that you can grease them while the thing's together. So you have to pull it all apart to repack it. Hopefully the camera won't refocus automatically while I do this, but first things first, before I can put this bolt in there, this bolt goes in there to hold the tension. It looks like something where you could just run this bolt in there and it would push on the wedge, but you really you can tear up one of these bolts and bend it doing that, so you have to set it with a punch and a hammer, like so. I'm sure there's a preload setting, like most four-wheel drives, where you have to move the thing back and forth holding a scale. But with these old Colemans, you just drive it in as far as you can without tearing stuff up. Like so. You can tell when she starts biting in and doesn't want to move anymore. So now, the bolt goes in. It's an 11/16 oversized head. It's a 7/16 fine thread bolt. Alright, tighten her up. Okay, it's tight. Run the jam nut up the threads. For some reason that's a 5/8. Would make more sense the other way around, I think. I would think, but tighten her up and she's done. Bing, bang, boom. Okay, so that wraps up the reassembly of the wheel end of a Coleman axle. So I've got the wheels back on the truck already. I have, see if the brake line's connected in there. I'm going through the rear of the truck because those brake lines need to be completely replaced, and I'm going through the rear brakes. The only thing I have to do on the front axle at this point is basically just adjust the brakes out, and then when I get fluid in the system, bleed them out. So they're pretty much good to go. Well, I need to connect the drag link. Being able to steer is important, I'll admit that. So anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you dig this sort of thing. It really helps me out and I appreciate it. Appreciate y'all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.